Welcome back to the MadSpideyverse. I'm MadSpidey, and thanks once again for tuning into my channel. I haven't done one in about a month, but I thought I'd do another one of my comic wish list. This will be part number 5 of a very, very long list. I've mentioned quite a few many times on live streams and other videos and things like that, even in my Mad Mail calls, that I basically, like a lot of collectors, we have, you know, a wish list of comics that we'd eventually love to buy or try to own. Obviously, some are very obtainable. Some are sort of, you know, might need to save a little bit over time and just have a bit of luck and, you know, try and eventually own them. And there are some that are like right up here somewhere that realistically, unless you win Lotto, are never going to happen. Obviously, I have, as I said, a very extensive list. I also have a lot of each of those categories on that particular list. So, you know, I have things like, you know, Amazing Fantasy 15 and X-Men #1 and Fantastic Four #1, like, you know, all these really, really big books. And then I've got those sort of ones in the middle, like, you know, like a Tomb of Dracula 10, which I actually did the thing. I actually saved up. I was, you know, lucky enough to get one at a reasonable price over here. And then you got your ones sort of in your lower tier and things like that that are sort of, you know, more like a $50 book or $100 book or a $200 book or something like that. You know, that I've been, you know, able to maybe pick up or, you know, want to pick up in the future. This particular list will be another sort of, I think, 9 or 10 books. I'm trying to sort of keep it at that sort of, around that sort of 10 per episode, because I don't want the episode going for, you know, half an hour, 40 minutes, because people are just not going to watch that kind of length of video, especially for something like this. So try and keep it at a reasonable sort of length, sort of like a, you know, a 10 minute to 15 minute absolute most, which most of mine have sort of gone for. So, but let's get stuck into the list. This one's a little bit of a mixed bag. This one's actually quite X-Men orientated. Obviously, you know, me being a Spidey guy, I do love a lot of the Marvel stuff. I do love, you know, X-Men and Fantastic Four and Avengers, and, you know, I do love them all. So I have a very wide variety, but this one's a little X-Men centric. There are a few, obviously, non-X-Men books, but it's fairly heavy sort of X-Men based. So the first book I'm going to mention, and I've mentioned this before, most of my books are old, but I do have a few modern grails that I am trying to obviously obtain at some point, you know, to add to my collection. So the first one is one sort of on the lower sort of level of, not dollar wise, but, you know, sort of on the list, and that is NYX #3, which is the first appearance of Laura Kinney, who you may know as X-23. Still one of those books that's quite rare over here, actually. I think I may have only seen it 2 or 3 times actually for sale over here. Not necessarily an old book. It's still a book I'd love, you know, obviously being a big Wolverine guy as well. You know, X-23 is sort of part of that mythology, so I'd really love to, you know, to have the first X-23 book. So NYX #3, definitely on the list. Excuse me. Next one is a Bronze Age book that's, it is obtainable, definitely for me. It's just whether it's, you know, at that right sort of price that I'm willing to pay, and that is Luke Cage, Heroes for Hire #1, which is the first appearance of Luke Cage. I did have, obviously, the Heroes for Hire, Luke Cage and Iron Fist. I was lucky enough to actually pick up the first Iron Fist last year, so I was able to cross that book off the list, but I still need Heroes for Hire #1. So, yeah, the first Luke Cage, definitely on the list. The next one is another one like that. It's sort of a Bronze Age book. Is Astonishing Tales, #25, and that is the first appearance of Deathlock, Luther Manning. Deathlock's always been one of those sort of characters that I've always been very intrigued about, so I'd love to own his first appearance. I remember a lot of the 90s Spider-Man books, whether it be Amazing or just the, the Todd McFarlane standard, like Spider-Man run. He did do a lot of crossovers with Spider-Man. So that sort of intrigued me a lot about the particular character. So yeah, I'd just love to get his first appearance, just, to read it. Yes, I did say read. And see what, his first appearance is all about. So yeah, Astonishing Tales 25. Definitely on the list. So the next one is, now obviously I've mentioned the big dollar book out of the three. So you've got Hulk 180, 181, and 182. Obviously I think it was my first comic wish list, I mentioned 181 is the big dollar book that I'd love to own. I haven't actually put 182 on the list. On the video list, should I say. It is on my comic wish list, but I actually crossed that off the list about a month ago. So very lucky to cross that off the list. So the only one that's left is Hulk 180, which there's obviously the big controversy about cameo versus first full appearance, or just cameo, full appearance. Everybody's had this argument, discussion, debate, whatever you want to call it. As far as most of your your go collects and your cover price and all those sort of type things, key collector and all that, it is classified as Wolverine's first cameo appearance. So I'd love to own the trilogy. Obviously 181 is a book that's pretty much out of my reach, but I always say never. But 180 is one of those books that I think if at the right time, right price, I think I'd definitely be able to own it. So yeah, Incredible Hulk 180 definitely on the list. So the next one is one of I'd classify it as a big boy book. I know it has dropped a little bit in price in recent times because the market has sort of evened out a little bit, but Giant Size X-Men #1. Giant Size X-Men #1 is just one of those books that a lot of people have as grails, even if they're not necessarily big X-Men fans. Because it's basically the first appearance of the new lineup. So, you have, obviously, Wolverine was in Hulk, but he's part of the new lineup. So it's first Storm and first Colossus, first Nightcrawler, first Thunderbird, who doesn't actually last too long, unfortunately. I think it's a lot of first appearances of Krakoa, I think, as well, and places and people and that. It's just one of those books that's just full of first appearances, and it's definitely a book I've always wanted to own. So yeah, Giant Size X-Men #1 definitely on the list. Probably not something I'm going to ever be able to get, but as once again, never say never. So to coincide with that, Uncanny X-Men 94 is classified as the second appearance of the new team. So Giant Size X-Men 1 and X-Men 94 basically go hand in hand for first and second appearances of all these new characters and the start off of all the new team. So it's definitely been one of those books that's sort of lower on my radar, apart from Giant Size, but definitely a book I've always wanted to own. So yeah, X-Men 94, definitely another one on the list. The next one is probably a book that's a little bit more of one of those achievable ones, and it is Marvel Spotlight #28, which is actually not his first appearance, but his first solo story of Moon Knight. So definitely a book, that's sort of, ever since I picked up Werewolf by Night 32, which is one of those sort of, medium-sized books that I was sort of talking about, I was able to luckily, once again, pick that up, I think either last year or the year before. Very, very lucky on an eBay auction on that. I've always wanted this book to coincide with owning that book as well. So yeah, Marvel Spotlight 28, first solo story for Moon Knight, definitely on the list, and I think definitely very achievable. Next one's a little bit of a curveball one. It is Eternals #1. Now obviously the movie itself, the hype going up to the movie, all the Eternals books skyrocketed in price. Movie came out, totally bombed. I didn't mind the movie, like it was okay. I was a bit discombobulated with the story, but I didn't mind it overall. I didn't know hardly anything about the Eternals at all. But it's something that's always intrigued me that, you know, like I'd like to, you know, obviously broaden the horizon a little bit. So, you know, it's basically the, it's the first, like, or first, they classify it as first partial appearance of the Eternals themselves. Like obviously you don't get the full team, like, you know, issues 2 and 3. I think right up into issue 10 or 13 or something like that, you basically get, you know, first appearances in nearly every single book. But obviously one of the main characters, Icarus, his first appearance is in number 1, and it's pretty much the start off of the Eternals. So yeah, more of a curiosity thing. I wouldn't really want to spend a massive amount of money on it, but you know, if I came across it for, you know, $100 or even $200, I wouldn't mind actually getting a copy of Eternals number 1. So it's still on the list anyway. The next book, another X-Men book, is Uncanny X-Men 101, which is the first appearance of the Phoenix. Obviously not Dark Phoenix, but just, you know, the Phoenix, which is Jean Grey in the green outfit. Before it obviously, you know, went dark quite later on down the track, another 30 issues or whatever it happened to be. But that is basically the start of the Phoenix Saga 101. So yeah, it's definitely a book with a very iconic cover of obviously, you know, Jean Grey coming out of the water, and, you know, all the rest of the X-Men are sort of, you know, almost half drowning and things like that. It's a very iconic cover, very cool character, or, you know, take on a character, because it is Jean Grey, but just possessed by the Phoenix entity. So definitely a book that I've always wanted to own. And that is, yeah, like, I remember actually seeing that book, you know, in you know, back issue bins and stuff, you know, 10, 15 years ago for $15, $20 and things like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, maybe one day I'll grab it. But I was too busy focusing on Spidey books and never picked it up. And now it's, you know, $100, $200, $300, whatever dollar book. And but it is, I think, definitely a book that in the right circumstances, once again, definitely achievable. So Uncanny X-Men 101, definitely on the list. Now, the last book I'd like to spotlight that's on my wish list that I'd love to grab is Marvel Premiere number 47, which is the first appearance of Scott Lang as Ant-Man. So obviously Scott Lang appears further back. I can't remember the issue. It might be like Avengers 181 or something along those lines. You tell me in the comments anyway, but I'm pretty sure I've got that book on my list as well. But yeah, this particular book is when Scott Lang actually becomes Ant-Man. So obviously with Quantumania, but obviously the previous Ant-Man movies and the Avengers movies, it has rised up a little bit in price, but you know, it's definitely an achievable type book. I have seen them over here for a few $100s and things like that, which, you know, I'd like to pay less, like, you know, like everybody would like to pay less for some of these books, but something that's definitely achievable for me. The other thing is actually the first appearance of Cassie, his daughter, and also Darren Cross, who you may remember from the first Ant-Man movie, as well as the current Quantumania movie. And Darren Cross eventually becomes Yellow Jacket. So yeah, definitely a book that I've always wanted. It's just, you know, more money versus opportunity and things like that. So that's it for this particular list. So if you did watch to the end, thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate every single one of my subscribers. So don't forget, you know, hit that thumbs up if you want to. Leave a comment if you wish. But most of all, don't forget to subscribe if you're new to the channel. It is greatly appreciated. So thanks once again. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and Spidey out.